Yeah, sure.
stuff.
Yeah, we got here yesterday.
Good. Got here some good weather.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Way, could be way worse here.
Oh, yeah.
We'll take this.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Whitefish Point and the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum. My name is Bruce Lynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society. And before we start, I'd like to just extend a thank you and a welcome to everybody who's traveled all the way to our little corner of the world up here at Whitefish Point to join us for this remembrance that we do every November the 10th. I've talked to a lot of you today. I know there's a number of you, a lot of people that are very aware of the Shipwreck Society and what we've been doing since 1995, and particularly since the Edmund Fitzgerald Bell was brought up in a combined Royal Canadian Navy, Sony Corporation, National Geographic, and Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society expedition to recover the bell being one part, and the other part is to further document the shipwreck itself, but ultimately making that the last expedition to go down to the Fitzgerald wreck site, and now it is a grave site, as many of you know at this point. But in any case, that is part of what we do as an organization, but primarily the idea of remembrance, not just for the Edmund Fitzgerald, but also for shipwrecks on the Great Lakes in general. You may be surprised. There are some statistics tell us 6,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. Others tell us there's 10,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes, and somewhere in the range of 30,000 sailors that have lost their lives on the Great Lakes and working on these ships. And a small part of what we do at the organizational level is to search for and document these wrecks. And we've had some good luck in recent years finding shipwrecks. We've actually discovered 15 shipwrecks in the last 4 years, and they all have fascinating stories. But with that being said, there's one shipwreck that most people that come to Whitefish Point want to learn more about, and that's exactly the shipwreck that we're going to be talking about today, and it is the one that we remember. Those 29 crewmen primarily each year on November the 10th, that's who we're remembering, and that's what this event is all about here today. I'd like to thank our Fitzgerald family members that are with us today. Of course, we have our event that's going to be taking place at 7 p.m. this evening. That is for those Fitzgerald family members, but we have a lot of them that are with us here today. So we'd like to welcome those of you that are with us for this daytime event. I'd like to also welcome Governor Whitmer and Senator DeMoose, who have helped us in so many ways. Both their offices, their staff, and what they do make it possible for a small nonprofit like the Shipwreck Society in a little, again, corner of the world that we have up here at Whitefish Point to do what we do. And much of what we do, again, is centered around remembering those shipwrecks and, most importantly, the sailors that have gone down in those wrecks. People come up here to learn about those other wrecks, but again, the Fitzgerald is the one that most people want to learn about. So with that, I would like to just say thank you again for everybody who's joined us. And I know, talking to a lot of people today, we have a lot of different corners of the country represented here today. So we thank you for making the trip to come out and join us. Now, we have a little bit of a weather front moving our way at this point. So I'm gonna move things along, and I'm going to introduce Brother Jim Boynton for the invocation.
Our lives can change in an instant. What is reality one day may be completely changed the next. Our own role can be that of casual observer, intimately connected to those affected, or the person directly impacted. 50 years ago, last night, my father took 8-year-old me to the breakwall in St. Ignace to experience the storm. Wearing my pajamas, we laughed each time the waves broke over the car. I went to bed, excited and entertained. The next morning at breakfast, Dad announced to our family the news from the radio that the Edmund Fitzgerald had been lost in the previous night's storm. I still remember the empty feeling inside. How do we respond to others' loss? What is our role? 15 years ago, I was working in Haiti when an earthquake shook the earth and killed upwards of 300,000. The number of people who came to help was incredibly inspiring. The number of disaster tourists who came just to gawk left me empty. A few years ago, I was driving back from St. Ignace to Detroit very early in the morning in time to arrive for the school day. Just outside of Detroit, there was a traffic accident that caused a tremendous delay. I was annoyed, irritated, and upset that I would be late for class. Upon arrival to the school, I learned it was one of our own students who had died in the crash. I felt quite ashamed of my earlier reaction. Let us pray. Dear Lord, you mourned with us 50 years ago, and you mourn with us now. We ask that you accompany us today as a community formed to carry on their memory, and whenever possible, help fulfill the dreams and goals of the lives cut short, and offer comfort and solace to their loved ones left behind. We humbly thank you for the opportunity to be here together, and ask for your blessing upon us and all those affected by their loss. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Brother Jim. I think many of you who visited the museum, when you walk into those double doors, very often people are looking forward and looking in the direction, center of the museum. People are noticing that white shoal second order Fresnel lens that's there, but most people notice the Edmund Fitzgerald bell sitting right there, very much the centerpiece of the museum. The one thing that I don't think that many people notice as they walk in is there's a little plaque, and it says Father Edward Dowling, and I believe it says SJ as well, Society of Jesuits. Brother Jim is a Jesuit as well. Father Dowling, if you're not familiar, probably did as much or more as far as research, artwork, and creating awareness of shipwrecks, including the Edmund Fitzgerald, as much or more than anybody else, or any other researcher. And at the same time, that main gallery in there is dedicated to him. So when we're open next year, when you come through and visit, just take a look. You'll see that plaque as you walk in. He's one of the individuals that, like I said, probably did more than most to create an awareness of the stories of these sailors, ships, and shipwrecks. So with that, I alluded to the idea that we're a relatively small nonprofit up here at the Shipwreck Society. And we do rely on help from people like Senator John Moose and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And they both have statements that they're going to make. So I'd like to welcome Governor Whitmer first.
Thank you, Bruce. It is an honor to be here today. My husband and I jumped at the opportunity when we were invited to come. It is great to be here at Whitefish Point to commemorate 50 years since the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I want to thank the Shipwreck Museum for hosting us and all the work that you do. I want to thank my good friend, Senator John DeMoose. And today I want to talk a minute about the wreck and what it means and how it brings Michiganders together. 50 years ago tonight, the mighty Edmund Fitzgerald. Okay, there we go. The mighty Edmund Fitzgerald and its 29 crew disappeared below Lake Superior's waves. They hailed from Iron River, Wisconsin, St. Joseph, Michigan, Clearwater, Florida. Some had served in the Navy or the Marines, fighting in World War II and the Korean War. And true to form for this Midwestern melting pot of a crew, many loved to hunt and fish. Maintenance man Joseph Mazes had 2 months off every winter that he used for two things: visiting family and ice fishing. They sailed under Captain Ernest McSorley, a courageous, skilled leader who was on his last voyage before retirement. But we know what happened on that cold November night, facing hurricane winds, monster waves, and pitch darkness. The Edmund Fitzgerald went to its final resting place. In the half-century since the wreck, the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald has become a legend. Examined, debated, celebrated, it has passed into lore. Folks look out at Lake Superior and are reminded of its frightening power. Bars still play Gordon Lightfoot's song. There are t-shirts and hoodies, coffee mugs, Lego kits, and Christmas ornaments. People even build 40-foot-long snow sculptures of the Fitz in their front yard. But here today, we come together in a somber moment of reflection. 50 years later, we ring the bell, we read the names, and we remember those we lost in this horrible tragedy. But the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald has become foundational to who we are. After the wreck, countless people and communities came together to locate the sunken ship, to pick up the pieces, and to rally around the families of those we lost. The Arthur Anderson and other ships courageously set out into the storm, answering the Coast Guard's call to brave the winds and waves and search for survivors. The families told stories of loved ones, like that of the Edmund Fitzgerald crew member, Paul Ripa. We talk about him to keep his memory. We don't want to forget. The Edmund Fitzgerald is a reminder of who we are: a tough, gritty, brave, deeply compassionate people. I've seen these Midwestern instincts throughout my time as governor. Whether it's a polar vortex, a global pandemic, a broken dam, or a historic ice storm, we care about our neighbors and we work together. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a tragedy, but it also brought out the best in us, a generational instinct that is in our DNA. For that and for so much more, we will never forget that good ship and true called the Edmund Fitzgerald. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Whitmer. And I'm glad you did mention Paul Ripa, because we have a pretty good percentage of the Ripa family with us here today. I know a few couldn't make it. Representation, so thank you for that. Now, Senator John DeMoose. Senator DeMoose has joined us for how many years in a row now, I think? 4 or 5, I think, maybe more. But we appreciate you coming back each year. We appreciate your support. So let's give a round of applause for Senator DeMoose.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to this great society and for pausing to remember this, and thank you to Governor Whitmer. I remember that when we first talked about this, and we didn't even miss a beat. You said, yes, I'll be there, and I think everybody here really appreciates that. I know I do. Several days ago, the Michigan Senate passed a resolution officially declaring today, November 10th, 2025, Edmund Fitzgerald Day. It's my honor to, in a moment, present that resolution here on these northern shores in memory of the haunting tragedy that unfolded on Lake Superior just a few miles from where we stand 50 years ago tonight. The Great Lakes have always been a paradise, vast and breathtaking in their beauty, yet capable of unleashing a raw, untamable power that humbles every soul that ventures upon them. They are the inland seas of North America, majestic, merciless, and eternal. And the stories of the more than 30,000 men, women, and children who have perished in their depths have become the stuff of legend. But none have captured the world's imagination quite like the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. In those final violent hours as the gales of November roared, 29 men fought for their lives against an unforgiving sea. And when the storm fell silent, the lake kept its secret, because today, no one can say with certainty what brought down that ship. But all those who live near these waters understand what it means to look out at their shifting gray surface and feel both wonder and fear. Anyone who has, like me, stood along these shores and watched the great freighters pass understands the sheer power of what they are seeing. Massive steel vessels, some 1,000 feet long, built by human hands, carry the materials that literally built our civilization. Anyone who has visited the Sioux Lodge, just about 40 miles downstream from here, where the Edmund Fitzgerald was headed that night, and anyone who has stood there and pondered the history of the ships that have traversed them, knows that the materials transported by these vessels through these very waters built the greatest industries the world has ever seen. We've accomplished incredible things in history, not the least of which was hauling the iron ore that became the airplanes, tanks, and jeeps that literally defeated Adolf Hitler and won World War II by turning Michigan into the arsenal of democracy. And yet, with every load carried, every crossing made, there's always risk. Because, as they mentioned in that great song, the lake never gives up her dead. Today marks the 50th anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald's foundering amidst the brutal gales of November. I cannot imagine the power of Lake Superior or the horror of that scene that could have brought down such an enormous vessel on that day. And as we gather in remembrance, we honor those 29 sailors, their families who suffered so much, many of whom are with us today. And in fact, all of those souls who have met their end on the Great Lakes over the centuries. Each one gave their lives in service to something greater than themselves: commerce, exploration, discovery, and the relentless pursuit of progress. And as we present this resolution to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum, let it be more than just words on paper. Let it be a solemn promise that we will never forget the price paid by those who dare to challenge the inland seas, and that every November 10th, as the winds rise against Lake Superior, let us fix our eyes on those waves and honor them anew. So Bruce, on behalf of the state of Michigan, I want to present this to you, officially naming today the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Thank you very much, Senator DeMoose. We are honored to have both you and Gretchen, Governor Whitmer, here today be with us. And also, this is we will find a very prominent location where we will display this. So, thank you again. Now, this is a moment with this particular ceremony, at least for the evening ceremonies that we do each year, where we have someone who either has researched, has written, or has been a part of the story of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Over the years, we've had individuals that have either sailed on the Fitzgerald and have come to speak to the attendees, and mostly Fitzgerald family members. But we've also had other individuals who are part of what I would consider some of the hidden stories surrounding this overall story that makes up the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Many of you are probably aware, especially if you're coming to an event like this, you're aware of the story of the Wood Rush, the Coast Guard cutter that crossed Lake Superior to try to get to the last known location of the Fitzgerald, literally going out into that storm that very night and crossing the entire length of Lake Superior in the process. We have at least one of the crew members with us here today, and we've had other members of that crew as well that have come over the years. Those are the kinds of stories that we like to share when we do events like this. But we have a series of speakers that are coming in today. The first one I consider a good friend, John U. Bacon. John has written what I consider to be the absolute best of the new generation of books that are coming out. I think there's 8 of them that have been released this year about the Fitzgerald. I think we had about 30 that we had kept track of prior to that. A lot of books, tells you about the interest in this story. But John's, I think, is the best. And what John's does is it tells this more of these human stories. It brings the stories of the men onto paper and shares those stories. John is connected with a lot of the Fitzgerald surviving family members in the process, and to keep that memory alive of those crewmen. It's not just about the ship. It's not just about those technical aspects, although I think there's a lot of us that find those things to be interesting. But the stories of the men, I think that's what really brings the history and the whole story of the Fitzgerald in general to life. So, John is going to be speaking a little bit to the context of the Edmund Fitzgerald in its time. And so let's give John U. Bacon a big round of applause.
Thank you all, and pardon me as I lower the microphone. I am 5'8". Also, thank you all for being here. The crowd often thanks the speakers for being here. I'm going to be here whether you show up or not. And in this case, I parked way in the back, and it's fully a mile of cars. That's about 1,000 cars between here and there. That means about 2,000 or 3,000 people are probably here today. You are making one of the strongest statements you could possibly make about the Edmund Fitzgerald and your devotion to it and the men on board, of course. So let me further say, as a native Michigander, you people are not made of candy. When it's too hard for everyone else, it's just right for us. Don't forget that. So, the Fitzgerald, of course, is well known, but I'm sure by everyone here. I'll keep that part brief. But it is worth saying that when Edmund Fitzgerald ordered their ship to be built, he had one main edict that it'd be the finest ship the Great Lakes had ever seen, and in fact it was. It was the longest, it was one of the fastest, it had the most cargo, it set every record on the Great Lakes repeatedly. It was a champion heavyweight, it was a sprinter, it was a workhorse, it truly was the greatest ship on the Great Lakes. But through this book, I want to tell a bigger story, as Bruce had alluded, about shipping in general, about the Great Lakes in particular, of course, and all that means. I was surprised to learn in my research, for example, that when you talk to experienced sailors, and by that I mean the freighters, not the guys with the sailboats, of course, the guys who are on these freighters, on the Great Lakes, and on the Atlantic, everyone told me consistently and repeatedly, the Great Lakes are more dangerous than the Atlantic Ocean, and as John Hayes told me, and it's not even close. And when the salty captains get on the Great Lakes, they laugh at first until the first storm, and then they shut up and find safe harbor. So that impressed me. Of course, the power of the region also impressed me, and I grew up in Michigan, as I said, but even I was struck to learn that from 1945 to 1975, this area right here was Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley, and it was actually more impressive than that. Silicon Valley has competition from Seattle, from Austin, Texas, from the Chinese. There was no competition whatsoever for Silicon Valley here in the state of Michigan during that time. I can prove that several ways. In 1960, in the census, the five of the 7 most populous states were all attached to the Great Lakes. New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, and Michigan, of course. Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota were not far behind. The only 2 others on that list were California and Texas. And how about this fun fact? In 1960, a Great Lakes town that was bigger than Jacksonville, Tampa, Miami, Nashville, Tennessee, and San Jose, California, Toledo, Ohio. How about that? The Glass City, of course, produced the windshields for the car makers in the Big 3. 37 of the top 100 companies in the United States all revolved around Detroit. It was that powerful. Shipping, therefore, was essential to all of it. This was the circulatory system of the beating heart that was Detroit. How important was it? Shipping is 3 times more efficient than trains. It is 6 times more efficient than trucks. This is not 6% or 60%. That is a 600% advantage over any other way of transporting goods. That's why all the stuff went on the ships. And what goes on the ships? Pretty much everything you have. All right, the basement, the cement in your basement, the car in your driveway, and the food in your table is all delivered by the ships that are going past us right now. And what amazed me about that, therefore, is that why is this vital industry so invisible? And I thought about it, and I realized there are only 30 people on each ship. Even in the heyday, there were only 300 ships. That is 9,000 people spread out over 8 Great Lakes states. So you're probably not going to meet them, and even if they live next door, you're still not going to meet them because that guy's on a ship. Their seasons were 9 months out of the year, 9 months straight back then. No holidays, no anniversaries, no birthdays, no graduations. It's a very, very tough lifestyle, and that is something we all have to appreciate and respect. These people, in my view, were heroes long before November 10th, 1975. And one of the guys I talked to, an experienced sailor, said when the season started, he'd put the photos of his family face down on his cabin table. It was too heartbreaking to look at those all season long. The last 2 weeks, he'd pull them up. He also told me, I'm very close to my 3 children. I didn't teach any of them how to throw a baseball or ride a bike. These are the sacrifices made by the sailors and by their families. He also told me nothing better at the end of the season than to come back after 9 months at sea with a nice fat bonus check in your pocket. Union contracts, these were good salaries back then. Sit down in your nice, warm, comfortable chair by the fire, a chair that is not moving. Get your favorite drink, and your kids run up to you, and they give you big hugs. And they say, "Daddy, you smell like a truck." And my friend said, "No, I smell like a paycheck." You know the difference. So, what motivated me, therefore, yes, I was curious about what happened, of course, that night, and I think we strengthened some theories and weakened others. But it's almost impossible to truly get down to what exactly happened with what we know today and what we're going to know in 10 or 20 years. And why is that? All right, as John Tanner told me, he's the Great Lakes Maritime Academy superintendent for 16 years. When a big ship goes down, it is rarely one thing that takes it down. It's a series of dominoes that start falling one by one. When they start falling, watch out. That night was, in fact, as the previous speakers have alluded, the storm of the century. By the time the Edmund Fitzgerald ended up where it is now, of course, 17 miles off this point, according to David Schwab, a great researcher at Michigan Tech and the University of Michigan, he's run computer models. That ship ended up at exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. 100-mile-per-hour winds, that is hurricane force. Waves that we now know through computer models were 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet, some even 60 feet high on a ship that only has 11 feet out of the water on a good day, and that was not a good day. So that's what happened in part to that ship, of course. Decisions were made, things broke down, etc., but really, ultimately, I side with Aunt Ruth. Aunt Ruth is the mother of Bruce Hudson. Bruce Hudson was a 22-year-old deckhand who went down with a ship in 1975. A very interesting guy, to say the least. Aunt Ruth was 4'9", and as her niece Pam Whittick said, she was 4'9", but she told you she was 5'5", and you believed her. She was a spark plug of a personality by all accounts. She said, ultimately, only 30 know what happened. 29 men and God, and no one's talking. Ultimately, we have to be satisfied with that and not lose sight in the search for those answers of what we know happened. We lost 29 men that night, and in the process, 29 families, of course, suffered without their fathers, their uncles, their cousins, in some cases their boyfriends. So, keeping that in mind. They say history is written by the victors. On the Great Lakes, history is written by the survivors. And on the ships, and I studied many of them for this book, the ships where no one survived, we know almost nothing, and that broke my heart. And I thought we have to fix that. So my real purpose here was not simply the whodunit of what happened, but trying to tell you who the 29 men were, what their lives were like on board, on shore, where they lived, what their families were like, how they were remembered by their families. That's the bigger story to me, because that does not change. So in this case, I did not want history merely to be written by the survivors. I wanted us to know who these people were as a prism, as a microcosm of the 6,000 ships that went down before, and the ships that still sail every day today. 3 quick examples. 1, Captain Ernest McSorley, as Governor Whitmer pointed out, this was supposed to be his last trip. In fact, his last trip was supposed to be the week before. I learned that in my research from Doug Frericks in Two Harbors, Minnesota, whose dad talked to him 2 weeks earlier. He was going to retire that year, that season, that week, along with 5 other men on that ship. But his wife had cancer in 24-hour care in Toledo, Ohio. He added 1 more trip for the bonus to pay for her health care. So this trip itself is born of heartache and born of devotion and sacrifice. You also had Bruce Hudson, I mentioned him before. Of course, he was about to go on a cross-country trip in his hot rod 1972 Dodge Challenger built in Detroit, of course. And he's ready to go with his buddy Mark Thomas, when his girlfriend, and they're about to go out west, of course, to go to Colorado to get some Coors beer, because back down there was very exotic, I swear. And he finds out in September from his girlfriend that she is in fact pregnant. So he thinks fast and says, don't worry, we'll move in together, we'll raise the child ourselves. He says, with that in mind, please go on your trip anyway. And you've earned it. It's only a month, and the baby's due in June, of course. Well, that baby is here today. That baby is Heather. All right, and she also had 4 children. The oldest of 4 children, Austin, looks just like Bruce Hudson. Aunt Ruth lost in that one moment her only child, and then found out 6 months later she's going to be a grandmother. And then, of course, a great-grandmother. And as she told Pam Wittig, her niece, she loves all her grandchildren equally, but yes, she plays favorite, the one Austin that looks just like Bruce Hudson. One last one, Eddie Binden, 47 years old, about to retire after 25 years in the Great Lakes. Also married for 25 years to Helen in the Cleveland suburbs. They had no children. So the day before they leave, on November 8th, 1975, he sneaks across from Superior, Wisconsin to Duluth, Wisconsin to buy his wife a 2-carat diamond ring to celebrate their 25th anniversary. And for reasons only he knows, instead of taking that diamond ring and his love note and putting that in his duffel bag, he gives it to a friend with his address and says, please mail this to my wife. And that's what he did. And of course, after the ship went down, 3 days later, she receives the package. She wore the wedding ring the rest of her life, and she never remarried. These are just some of the stories on that ship that day. Let's keep that in mind. So, they also say that we are truly not gone until the last person who remembered us, who cared about us, who loved us, is gone. And my whole ambition in writing this book was to extend their lives in that way, extend their memory forever. And then you showed up today. Take a moment to look around at this unbelievable crowd. We had no idea what to expect. There are no tickets given. There's no RSVP. All right, there's no reservations here. But here you are in a throng. And I have to believe Aunt Ruth, who passed away November 9th, 2015, the day before the 40th anniversary, because she told Gordon Lightfoot by phone that day that she had promised Bruce that she was going to join him in heaven before the 40th anniversary, because he had been alone too long. If she could see you today, if Bruce Hudson could see you today, if Ernest McSorley and his wife could see you today, they would know that they will never be forgotten and they are still loved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And John, I'm glad you focused on Aunt Ruth, which so many of us have come to know her as Aunt Ruth now. You did say she was 4'9". Pam, that's right, correct? 4'9". I have to share a very, very brief story about Aunt Ruth that Pam and I talked about the other night. We worked pretty hard within a few years of my starting in this job to gather photographs of every single crewman that was on the Edmund Fitzgerald the night it sank. And that was, you might be surprised at how challenging that really was to try to gather all those photographs. And we were very proud of this when we had all those photographs in a scrolling video that people could see as they walked through the museum. You could see those faces. It was more than just the names that were on a list that we had inside the gallery. But the year that Aunt Ruth came, and we had made a change, we had actually added James Pratt. We hadn't had his picture before, we added his, but something had happened to the video. Pam was sitting with Ruth, and Pam approached me with a very serious look, and again, Pam is Bruce Hudson's cousin, with a very serious look on her face. And what had happened is somehow when we had updated this video, somehow Bruce Hudson's photograph was not showing anymore in this, and that was the year that Aunt Ruth showed up. And as John said, she's 4'9". She was much scarier than you could imagine. She wasn't very happy with me at the same time, but yet she was very nice to me and even invited me to come down and visit her at her home down in Ohio after that. So we made sure immediately that Bruce Hudson's picture was back in there. So in any case, a story about Ruth. Ruth is actually very critical to the story that our development officer from the Shipwreck Society, Sean Lay, is going to be talking about. Sean has been with this organization for 35 years now. Let's give Sean a round of applause. 35 years. Or was that 55 years? I lost it. Sean Lay is our development officer for the organization. So for our membership, for our donors, for those individuals that come forward and support us in different ways, Sean is their #1 contact, and he's been doing this for a very long time. We're very happy that we have Sean on board, and we're very happy that Sean is going to be sharing a little bit of the backstory behind the raising of the Fitzgerald Belt. So, Sean Lay.
To be specific, during time, go back to the early 1980s. When Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, it was called then, invited us arts administrators to meet your freshman legislators, one of whom was Senator Gagliardi, sitting right there. He's the one who introduced me to the Shipwreck Society. Thank you, Ken. So, by 1995, there had been no less than 6 expeditions to the wreck site. This evoked a variety of feelings from the families of those who had been lost, as in addition to legitimate underwater science entities, there were also some insensitive people who sought to commercialize legend. At the time, the only regular gathering for the ship was held at the Mariners Church in. For the years immediately following loss, the service was part of their annual church service. Reverend Ingalls was very careful to avoid attracting an inordinate amount of attention to the families. However, around 1990, Florence Benson, who was the mother of Thomas Benson, an oiler on the Fitzgerald, found herself harassed by a certain young entrepreneur to the point of great unpleasant irritation. Obviously, a problem was developing. Many of us remember Florence very well. Scientific expeditions to the wreck continued in 1994 with their primary focus to explore environmental issues in Lake Superior. However, the Florida-based Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute, conducting one of these scientific studies, approached the Shipwreck Society that year, and we agreed to participate in an expedition to the wreck. This involved their vessel Edmund Link and a submersible named Clelia, named after one of the scientist's late daughters. But questionable expeditions by other less respectful explorers continued, and in one case even reported finding a body. Cheryl Rosman, who many of us knew, had had enough. She and Ruth attended a meeting at the Mariners Church on November 6, 1994. Gradually, interest among the family members grew, and in January 1995, the Shipwreck Society was approached by these extraordinary ladies of impeccable integrity and character to see if the ship's bell could be recovered as a lasting memorial. None of us then had any idea how much work would be involved in doing something like this. But Cheryl and Ruth had a vision, and they put all their effort into it, very actively contacting as many Fitzgerald family members as they could. They sent out letters, a questionnaire, and made innumerable telephone calls. Responses were received from 89 family members. Only 7 family members could not be located. And an unrelated person even filed a lawsuit to prevent the recovery of the bell. But the suit was dismissed as there was not a single family member among the plaintiffs. It was Ruth, motivated by her love for her son Bruce Hudson, who began to keep pushing for the bell recovery expedition. Any attempt to describe what was involved in securing permission from the Canadian government, from the owners of the wreck, and even the White House would be a gross understatement. Of course, coupled with that, how were we supposed to pay for it? Fortunately, to assist, came along Emery Christoph of the National Geographic Society and a man named G.W. Walchmai of the Canadian Navy. The Canadian Navy lent this expedition the full use of HMCS Cormorant with its 2 submersibles called the SDL-1 and Pisces 4 for as long as it took. The Cormorant was free. The time lent by the family members and the board of directors of the Shipwreck Society was free. But the nude suit, it was created by can dive owner Phil Newton. You can see it in the museum. And the expenses of Purvis Marine of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario were not free. To assist in paying for this and other expedition expenses, the Shipwreck Society took out loans and commissioned Petoskey artist David Conklin to create the famous oil paintings Passage in Moonlight and Every Man Knew, to be sold, which over time has proven most effective. Preparation for the bell recovery took a few days, with the bell recovery itself taking place on July 4th, 1995. Family members attending watched from David Dahlquist's 80-foot yacht, Northlander. The Shipwreck Society members, nude suit crew, and others were aboard the big tugboat Anglian Lady, watching diver Bruce Woco in the nude suit make the final cutting torch move that released the bell free from the pilot house. The dramatic moment of the bell reaching the surface has of course been captured forever, courtesy Al Kamuda, who worked for the Detroit Free Press in a very famous photograph. More than one family member has expressed that when the moment the bell rose into the fresh air on that glorious afternoon, a great feeling of peaceful closure came over them. And our shipwreck crew felt the same in terms of a goal accomplished, the knowledge we had helped the families, and this action would serve countless people in the future, as well as having changed our own lives forever. Credit for assistance in the recovery of the bell is due to the Fitzgerald family members, the Royal Canadian Navy, also known as Nali Royal Canadien, the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, National Geographic Magazine, the board and staff of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society, the Four Winds dealership of Catholic, Michigan, Reverend Ingalls and the Mariners Church, Thomas L. Farnquist, and Lightfoot. Of course, the story doesn't end there. In 2006, the families, particularly Cheryl and Ruth, were successful in their bid to the province of Ontario to get the wreck site designated an officially protected marine archaeological site through the Ontario Heritage Act. This means that absolutely no more expeditions, diving, or even sonar imaging of the wreck may take place without a special permit from the Ontario government, and the Shipwreck Society has faithfully honored its commitment to this law. This whole tale is unique among shipwrecks, among Great Lakes history, and in a way highly special human historical efforts honor and memorialize departed loved ones. But is it not our own living interactions and feelings today that matter the most when we all are dedicated as a collective group to see the memory continue in the face of what Mother Nature can do and that which we cannot understand, possibly eternity itself.
Thank you, Sean. Nicely done. Now, we have thousands of people come to the museum each year, and a lot of times our guests, and I would say more in recent weeks and recent months through the media, there has been a question that comes to us a lot, and why is it that the Edmund Fitzgerald is that much more well known? Why is it that Fitzgerald is something that so many people know about? Why is it in the public consciousness? I think most of us here probably know the answer to that question, correct? Why do we all know about the Fitzgerald? Gordon Lightfoot. I would like to think it's mostly our efforts at the Shipwreck Museum, but that's not the correct answer. Gordon Lightfoot is truly the reason that people know about this shipwreck. If you think of all those thousands of other shipwrecks that are out in the lakes, and some of them not so long ago, think of the Daniel J. Morrell, 1966, Northern Lake Huron. Think of the Carl D. Bradley, 1958, November 1958, Northern Lake Michigan. Those are shipwreck stories that are astounding. They are unbelievable. We know more about those shipwrecks because there were actually survivors from those shipwrecks, but there is a difference. A Canadian folk singer did not write a song about those other shipwrecks, but that Canadian folk singer Gordon Lightfoot did write the song, and that is why we know so much about it. Now, I would like to introduce Mike Fornes of the Gordon Lightfoot Tribute. Mike Fornes was what I always like to say when Gordon Lightfoot was still with us. He was the Gordon Lightfoot approved Gordon Lightfoot Tribute Band leader. So, and actually there was one time at a Fitzgerald ceremony where a person came up and asked him for his autograph, thinking that he was Gordon Lightfoot. So let's give Mike a big round of applause. Thank you for being with me.
You doing all right?
I am not Gordon Lightfoot. Mike Fornes is my name. I'm from Mackinac City. I first met Gordon probably 27 years ago, and he was very good to me over many years. I've performed in concert as him for the last 18 years. I've been in 9 states now and 2 Canadian provinces, and Gordon was very encouraging, and the guys in his band were terrific to the players in my band, and they really helped us a lot with authenticating sounds and getting things right so that we would sound right. They really were interested in what we were doing. So I'd like to tell you a little bit today about what I know about how he wrote the song. And I've read different places that he was on an airplane coming back from California and he read about the shipwreck going down. And actually his tour schedule doesn't verify that. He was in Detroit on the 8th of November that year. He was in Boston on the 9th. But does it really matter? You know, I mean, how he found out. He told me that he was at home in Toronto. He didn't play another show that year until the 21st of November, and that was in New York City. So did he go to California on some business-related thing, and maybe he was on a plane coming back and did read about it? We don't know. But he told me that he was at home. And he was upstairs in his writing room where he used to work on songs, and just fiddling around with these 3 or 4 chords that he remembered from an old Irish dirge that he recalled hearing as a child. Didn't have any real plans for it, just was strumming along, playing it. And he said it was about 11 o'clock, and he went downstairs to get a cup of coffee. CBC News was on, and that's when he heard about the ship going down, and he struggled for days to try to find more information about it because there was so little news to tell. Nothing new was there to report. Nothing had been found. The news media just kind of dropped the story after a few days. And then a little while later, Newsweek magazine came out with a story that was a blurb in a news index. Not a cover story, not a feature story, just a blurb, 5 paragraphs, a picture and a map in the middle of a news index of other news things that had happened. But it aligned pretty well the facts that were known at the time. And I can almost remember from memory the very first line of that news blurb, that story that was in the magazine. And it was titled, "Great Lakes, the Cruelest Month." And it said, according to a legend of the Chippewa tribe, the lake they once called Gitchigumi never gives up her dead. Have you heard those words before? Yeah. And it went on, and the story told about a captain that was very experienced and the crew that had been in big storms before, and here they were leaving out of Superior, Wisconsin, and carrying 26,000 tons of iron ore, headed across Lake Superior, and they got in this terrible storm, and a ship that was following them lost sight of them, and the ship went down. And he ends up by saying that in the 126-year-old stone church in Detroit, a pastor rang the bell 29 times in memory of those lost crewmen. And there were other details in that story too, but the basics were there that really gave Gord the idea that maybe there is a shipwreck song here. Well, at the time he was recording, preparing to record an album called Summertime Dream. Summertime Dream was going to be the follow-up to Gord's Gold. Do you remember Gord's Gold? It had If You Could Read My Mind and Sundown and Carefree Highway, Cotton Jenny, Rainy Day People. All the hits were on this double album that a lot of people bought. And the record company said, Gord, you got to follow that up with something big. People are listening to your music now. So he was getting things ready. He had 22 songs that he thought would be suitable to go on this new album, Summertime Dream. 22. And those were the candidates, but the record company said, of course, we're going to take 10 of them. Now, I don't know if all of you remember, but those of us that do, we used to have vinyl records, and on one side there'd be 5 songs, and we'd turn it over, and on the other side, we'd play 5 more songs, you know. So they've got to whittle down 22 songs to 10. There was nothing yet written about a shipwreck. It was still on a legal pad. Things were getting crossed out and changed and moved around, and more things were being found out in Gordon's research. And they went into the studio sometime after that and started recording the songs that were on Summertime Dream, my favorite Gordon Lightfoot album. Wonderful music. Love to play those songs in concert. But in between takes of some of the other things they were working on, Gord keeps fiddling around with this legal pad and changing things and moving things around and strumming these 3 or 4 chords and humming. Terry Clements, the late Terry Clements, wonderful lead guitar player, who was born in Detroit, by the way, told me that he finally just said, "What is that? What are you doing?" And Gord said, "Well, it's this shipwreck song that I'm working on." What shipwreck? Well, the Edmund Fitzgerald. It went down in Lake Superior. The guys in the band really didn't know anything about it. And Terry said, "Well, how are you going to start it?" And Gord said, "Well, I don't know. Come up with something." And Terry would do that. Gord would ask Terry to come up with something sometimes, and he would oftentimes play the vocal line in the middle of a song as a bridge. So he thought he would do that. Well, he came back and he had his acoustic guitar, and he said, "What do you think of this, Gord?" And he kind of played that vocal line that Gordon had been humming. And Gordon said, no, it's got to be more intense. It's got to have more to it than that. This is about a terrible storm. It's not an acoustic type thing, you know. Well, Terry finally came back a few days later and said, hey, how about this for your Shipwreck song? What if I played it on my electric guitar and I put it through a distortion pedal and it sounded like... Gordon said, yeah, that's it. That's what I want it to sound like. I like that. Rick Haynes, the bass player, who played with Gord for over 50 years, said, so this is a storm? You want the bass to be like thunder sometimes? And Gord said, that could work. Ed Ringwald, who went by the stage name of Pee Wee Charles, played pedal guitar. He said, you want the steel guitar to have kind of an eerie sound like the wind, you know? That could be, yeah, that could work too. That could work. And the producer said, hey guys, come on, let's go. Get back to it here. We got to get going on these songs. They continue on with Summertime Dream, working on those other songs. And Gord keeps fooling around with this and fooling around with it, and finally, one day, they had a little time left at the end of their recording session, and Gord said, hey, let's play the Shipwreck song. And the guys said, what do we play? We've never heard it. He said, well, just play what you feel. It's kind of the same thing over and over that I've been humming, but I mean, Terry's going to start it, and Rick will come in with some bass, and Pee Wee's going to have a few little things here and there, and you know, it'll be all right. Let's just try it. We just want to play it, just so we hear it. And the guys said, okay. Well, they started playing it, and they got through about a verse and a half, and Gord stopped them, and he said, that's too fast. You got to slow it down. It's got to have more feeling to it, more soul to it. Just play what you feel once we get going, and really put your feelings into it, you know, but slow it down a little bit. Okay, all right, well, we'll try it again. And he counted it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and boom, they started it, and they played, and they got all the way through it, and the guys put in these little parts here and there, and they finished it. And Terry Clements told me that he said, sheesh, that thing gave me the chills down my spine. And Rick said, Gord, I think you got a hit here. Maybe that ought to be on this album. And the producer said, we've got 10 songs. We're good, you know. Well, at least we ought to let the record company maybe hear it. And on the other side of the glass, the engineer said, you guys want to hear it back again? You mean you recorded it? Well, you've been fooling around with it for 2 weeks. I figured if you were going to play it all the way through, I'd roll tape. So they had a recording. They listened to that recording, and that's what they played for the record company. And they said, we'll think about it, get it ready for the album, like you're doing with the other songs, and we'll consider it. Do you know they worked on that song for 2 weeks? Recording it again and again and again, and they never could get it to sound the way that it sounded the first time they'd played it. And that's the version you heard on the radio. That first take is what you heard on the record album. The guys in the band had never played the song before. They had never heard the words. You don't make records that way. Right before they got started that last time, Barry Keane, the drummer, said, Gord, are there drums in this? Do I play on this? And Gord said, yeah, I'll nod to you when to come in. Like no direction as to hit the hi-hat or the cymbal or play the snare in this, or just I'll nod to you when to come in, you know? And he did. And that's what's on the record too. So I mean, it's incredible the way that it came out. But you know what? It was the #1 song on the radio in Canada in 1976 when it came out. #1 on their radio airplay. Our American Top 40, by the way, #2 in our country. #2. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald was the #2 song on the top 40 charts. Do you remember, how many of you remember 1976? Yeah. The #1 song that year? Barry Manilow, I Write the Songs. That's the one that was on the top 40 charts. Then there was the Hot 100, where you had a bigger variety and a little more rock and roll, and the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald was #2 on that one. #1 on the Hot 100, Rod Stewart, Tonight's the Night. Sometimes it works out that way. So we hear the song now and we think about it, and it's incredible how it was recorded. It's incredible the feeling that it still gives us. The radio stations play it at this time of year, and sometimes people say, oh, I don't want to hear that anymore, you know, it's so long. You know, 6 minutes long. Back then, radio stations didn't play 6-minute songs. Everything was 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. But they played that one, and they still do today. And every time we hear it, are you like Terry Clements? Does it give you a chill down your spine? It always does me, and I never get tired of playing it. And I hope that you enjoy hearing it today. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. Now we're coming to the moment that I think is what any of these memorial events are all about. And in this situation, it's about remembrance. It's about those 29 men that were on board that ship. So with that, I'm going to call back up to the podium Sean Lay, our development officer for the Shipwreck Society. We have Ann Edmund Fitzgerald bell here that we will be ringing 29 times, actually 30 times. We will ring a 30th time for all sailors lost on the Great Lakes. Sean.
The call to the last watch. Captain Ernest M. McSorley. John H. McCarthy. James Pratt. Michael Armagost. John D. Simmons. Eugene W. O'Brien. John J. Poviak. Thomas D. Borgeson. Ransom E. Cundy. William J. Spangler. Bruce L. Hudson. David E. Weiss. Robert C. Rafferty. Alan G. Coleman. Frederick J. Beecher. Nolan F. Church. George J. Hall. Edward F. Binden. Thomas E. Edwards. Carl A. Peckel. Mark A. Thomas. Paul M. Ripa. Russell G. Haskell. Oliver J. Champeau. Blaine H. Wilhelm. Ralph G. Walton. Thomas Benson. Joseph W. Mays. Gordon F. McClellan. And the 30th ring in remembrance of all mariners lost on the Great Lakes.
Thank you, Sean. And now, once again, Mike Fornes and the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
It's my honor to play this song for the men who died, for the families who were present, and for Gordon Lightfoot, who wrote this song. I need to tell you that I did find out that Gord did make it to the pearly gates. And when he got there, St. Peter was waiting for him at the podium. He said, "Come on in, Gordon. Bring your guitar. We've got 29 men up here from a ship that are pretty anxious to meet you." There are a few changes of the words in this song, brought about by the ladies of the committee, as Gord referred to them. At 7 p.m., the main hatchway didn't cave in. It's different now. And it's not a musty old hall in Detroit anymore. So listen for those two changes in the words. So here we go with the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And if you're on drums, I'll nod to you when to come in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Legend lives on from a Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigooly. The lake, it is said, never gives up her day when the skies of November turn gloomy. With a load of iron ore 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty. That good ship and true was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early. The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with a crew and good captain well seasoned, including some terms with a couple of steel firms when they left fully loaded for Cleveland. And later that night when the ship's bell rang, could it be the north wind they'd been feeling? The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound, and a wave broke over the railing. And every man knew, as the captain did too, 'twas the witch of November come stealing. The dawn came late and the breakfast had to wait when the gales of November came flashing. When afternoon came, it was freezing rain in the face of a hurricane west wind. When supper time came, the old cook came on deck, saying, fellas, it's too rough to feed ya. At 7 p.m. it grew dark, it was then. He said, fellas, it's been good to know ya. The captain wired in, he had water coming in, and the good ship and crew was in peril. And later that night, when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours? The searchers all say they'd have made Whitefish Bay if they'd put 15 more miles behind her. They might have split up, or they might have capsized. They may have broke deep and took water. And all that remains are the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters. Lake Huron rolls Superior sings in the rooms of her ice-water mansion. Old Michigan steams like a young man's dream. The islands and bays are for sportsmen. Farther below, Lake Ontario takes in with Lake Erie in December. And the iron boats go, as the mariners all know, with the gales of November, remember. Rustic old hall in Detroit they pray in the Maritime Sailors Cathedral. The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigoo. Superior, they said, never gives up for dead when the gales of November come early.
Thank you, Mike, very much. And did you notice the sun started to come out there for a second? Isn't that nice? Mike and his Gordon Lightfoot tribute have been on the road for 18 years. And how many locations did you hit in this country this year? Hit 2 Canadian provinces and how many states? I thought you said 49 for a second. Four of the 9. They've been traveling a lot, and we're very fortunate to have them with us, and they'll be playing tonight as well. And we're very fortunate to have you all as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here today. Governor Whitmer again, Senator DeMoose, Senator Gagliardi. Thank you all so much for being here. I'd also like to just, let's have a round of applause for any veterans that are with us here today. Thank you for your service. These muffled claps are kind of fun here. Also for our state police that are here today, and it's absolutely so gracious to be on here with us today. And also I'd like our Shipwreck Society staff who helped to make this a reality today too. If you're here, stand up please. We'll give you a round of applause. A lot of work. I can tell a lot of them can't wait to get back inside the building at this point. Thank you for that. Last few things before I reintroduce Brother Jim. There are, in case anybody was curious, there are some restaurants that are open in Paradise. That is a fact. And also, the Whitefish Township Community Center is going to be open at 5 o'clock, right, Deb? 5 o'clock, and there's going to be a live stream of the event that's taking place tonight. Will be posted there, and I think you'll even have some cookies and coffee and things like that. Coffee. So that'll be at the Whitefish Township Community Center. That's starting at 5 o'clock. Will be opened up, and the event tonight starts at 7. So with that, thank you all again very much, and Brother Jim.
In the early 1980s, my friends and I were swimming at the St. Ignace Marina when a beautiful wooden sailboat docked next to us. A man came on deck and started a friendly conversation. He threw some 50-cent pieces into the water, and we dove down and got him. The name was the Golden Goose, the man Gordon Lightfoot. Here's the 50-cent piece. It's how I remember. Let us pray. Lord, help us to remember the events and the people we have just commemorated. Help us to be a community of comfort and hope to all people, and give us the grace to respond to each situation in a manner most fitting of our best selves. Amen.
If there's any last housekeeping notes for this event, it would be that, again, tonight, 7 o'clock, if you'd like to view the live stream of the event that we'll be hosting, we'll have some of the same, but we're going to have more speakers tonight as well. That's on our website, shipwreckmuseum.com. I think we should give Corey Atkins a big round of applause. Corey's blood pressure might be up a little bit at this point. But the last thing I would say too, we are going to be having a number of Edmund Fitzgerald families driving in, and they'll be needing parking spots. So with those restaurants open in town, and with the community center open in town, that would be a wonderful thing to have a lot of open parking spaces for those families coming in. And yes, Sarah. Yeah, Sarah wanted me to remind everybody the gift shop is buttoning up. We're reworking part of it that will be opening up a little bit later for families that are coming in. But one last time, thank you everybody. Thank you Mother Nature for not hitting us with all that snow, and have a safe drive home.